Now, in the last video, we discussed the present simple positive form. In this video, we're talking about the negative and the question form. Now, don't worry, it's not super difficult, but you need to be careful. We have a special word called an auxiliary, okay? Now, the auxiliary is necessary for all of the present simple verbs except for the verb to be, because be is the auxiliary for itself. So, the auxiliary for all of the other verbs is do. We talked about do and how to conjugate it in the positive present simple video. So, we just need to take the verb do and put the negative word not. Okay? So, do not, we can say something like, I do not like pink. Okay? However, that is the long version of the negative, and normally native speakers use the contracted form. So, the contracted form of do not, you simply take out the O and put an apostrophe. So, do not becomes don't. I don't like pink. Okay? This works for the majority of subjects. So we say I don't like, you don't like, we don't like, you don't like, and they don't like. However, the third person singular is not don't. If you watched the positive video, you know that in the third person, do becomes does. And so it is not do not, it's does not, which becomes doesn't in the contracted form. So let's review a little bit of what we said. We have I do not, okay, I don't, you don't, she doesn't, he doesn't, it doesn't, we don't, you don't, and they don't. Okay? Now remember, the negative is simply inserted right before the verb, and we can use any verb we want that is not the verb to be. There are a few exceptions, but the exceptions we'll discuss in the future. So let's look at some examples. We have I don't like pink, you don't live in England, he doesn't work in an office, she doesn't play sport, the school, it, doesn't open on Sundays, we don't dance, you don't drink beer, and they don't eat pizza. You need to remember don't for I, you, we, you, and they, and doesn't for he, she, and it. Okay? So be careful, and remember, practice. Now let's look at some questions. So we want to start with the question words, which are often used in questions. So we have who, what, when, where, and why. Now obviously there are other question words, but we will discuss them in the future. So for now, just memorize these, okay? And we put them when necessary, at the very beginning of the question. The question word will always be the first word. Okay? Now, the question form in English is easy to remember, and if you memorize it now, it will make questions in other tenses significantly easier. So, the form is question word, auxiliary, subject, and verb. Okay? Let's look at some examples. Who do you live with? I live with my parents. What do you do? I'm an English teacher. When do you start work? I start at 9 o'clock. Why do you study English? I study English because I travel a lot. Where do you go to school? I go to school in London. All right, everybody, so that is the question form. Remember, question word, auxiliary, subject, and verb. So the question word can be who, what, when, where, and why. The auxiliary, for all of the verbs except the verb to be, is do, or in the third person singular, does. So, does he go to school? All right? The subject, so I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they, and then obviously the verb that you want to use in the question. So, remember, it needs to be in this form. The tone of your voice does not make a positive sentence a question, okay? You need to use the auxiliary, the subject, and then the verb. All right? Remember to practice. Bye, everybody.